The advent of Tasawwuf and its truth, Sufism, and teachings by Tahir-ul-Qadri. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Sufi Essence with Hammad Syed. In the vast and multifaceted tapestry of Islamic thought, few subjects have been as passionately debated and as profoundly misunderstood as Tasawwuf or Sufism, often relegated to the fringes of mainstream discourse. Tasawwuf is frequently portrayed as a foreign innovation, a mystical import from other traditions, or an esoteric practice detached from the realities of the divine law Shari'ah. However, for a scholar of the caliber of Shaykh Muhammad Tahir-ul-Qadri, who stands as a master of both the exoteric and esoteric sciences of Islam, Tasawwuf is not an alien concept, but the very heart and root of the faith. Shaykh Qadri's teachings on Tasawwuf are a powerful and scholarly defense of its truth, its authenticity, and its indispensable role in the life of every Muslim. He presents a compelling case that Tasawwuf is not a new invention, but the continuation of a spiritual discipline that existed from the very beginning of Islam, rooted directly in the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. He argues that Tasawwuf is the spiritual path to Ihsan, the highest station of faith, and the systematic methodology for the purification of the heart, a process that is a divine imperative for every believer. Our discourse today will be a comprehensive, structural, and exhaustive scholarly exploration of this profound spiritual perspective. In this extensive script, we will argue that Tahir-ul-Qadri's work on Tasawwuf is a monumental effort to restore its rightful place at the center of Islamic life. We will meticulously unpack his vision by examining the origins of Tasawwuf in the Qur'an and Sunnah, its definition as a spiritual science, and its central purpose of purifying the self-nafs and the heart Qalb. We will delve into his profound understanding of the inseparability of Shari'ah and Tariqah and the vital role of the spiritual guide in the Sufi orders. This is not just a lecture on a contemporary scholar. It is a profound journey into the heart of Islamic spirituality itself, a journey to discover the advent and the eternal truth of Tasawwuf. Part 1. Tasawwuf. Definition, origin, and the divine purpose. To properly understand Shaykh Tahir-ul-Qadri's perspective on Tasawwuf, we must first engage with his foundational definitions and his meticulous tracing of its origins. For him, Tasawwuf is not a vague form of mysticism, but a rigorous, spiritual science with a clear methodology and a defined goal. He defines Tasawwuf as the science of Tazkiya al-Nafs, the purification of the soul, and Ihsan's spiritual excellence. It is the inner dimension of Islam, the path that guides the seeker to a state of profound intimacy with Allah. Shaykh Qadri's most powerful and scholarly argument is that Tasawwuf is not a later innovation, but has its origins directly in the foundational sources of Islam, the Qur'an and the Sunnah. He points to numerous verses in the Qur'an that speak of the purification of the self, a concept that is central to Tasawwuf. The Qur'an states, "Indeed, he who purifies it, the soul, has succeeded, and he who corrupts it has failed." Surah Shams 91-9-10. He argues that this verse is a direct command from Allah to engage in the process of inner purification, a process that is the very essence of Tasawwuf. He also grounds Tasawwuf in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. The most powerful evidence he presents is the famous hadith of Jibreel, where the angel Jibreel comes to the Prophet in the form of a man and asks him about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. The Prophet defines Ihsan as to worship Allah as if you see him. For if you do not see him, he surely sees you. Shaykh Qadri argues that this definition of Ihsan is the very essence of Tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is the spiritual discipline, the practical methodology, that guides the seeker to this state of profound spiritual excellence, a state of continuous, unwavering awareness of the divine presence. Furthermore, he argues that the spiritual practices of Tasawwuf, such as spiritual retreat, continuous remembrance of al-Dhikr, and profound love for the Prophet, were practiced by the companions themselves. He points to the example of the al-Sufa, the poor companions who lived in a part of the Prophet's mosque and dedicated their lives to worship and spiritual discipline. They are the prototypes of the Sufis, the first generation of Muslims who understood that Islam was not just a legal code, but a comprehensive spiritual path that demanded the purification of the heart and the attainment of divine intimacy. For Tahir-ul-Qadri, the advent of Tasawwuf is not a historical event that happened centuries after the Prophet. It is an eternal spiritual reality that has its origins in the divine message itself. Part 2. the spiritual science of the self-nafs and the heart. At the very core of Shaykh Tahir-ul-Qadri's teachings on Tasawwuf is a profound and systematic understanding of the human self-nafs and the heart Qalb. He argues that the human being is in a state of continuous spiritual warfare, a battle between the lowered, driven self and the spiritual immortal Ruh. Tasawwuf, as a spiritual science, provides the seeker with the intellectual tools and the practical methodology to win this battle. He breaks down the concept of the nafs into 3 distinct stages, providing a clear map for the seeker to understand their own spiritual state. An-nafs al-amara, the commanding self. This is the lowest and most primal level of the self. It is the ego that commands one to do evil. Qadri describes it as a state of heedlessness, arrogance, and a continuous pursuit of worldly desires. It is a self that is a prisoner of its own passions, and is in a state of continuous rebellion against the divine will. The human being in this state is a slave to their lower nature. The book provides a clear diagnosis of this spiritual disease, explaining that its remedy lies in a rigorous adherence to the divine law Shari'ah, a sincere repentance tawbah, and a continuous struggle against its demands. The purpose of this stage of the journey is to tame the beast of the ego, to bring it into submission to the divine will. An-nafs al-awama, the blaming self. This is the second and intermediate level of the self. It is the conscience, the part of the human psyche that has awakened to the reality of its spiritual struggle. The nafs al-awama is a self that, while it still commits sins and makes mistakes, immediately regrets them and blames itself. It is a state of spiritual awakening, a stage where the human being has become aware of the duality of their existence and is engaged in a continuous struggle against the lower self. Shaykh Qadri teaches that the remedy for this stage is a continuous practice of self-examination, muhasabah, a constant remembrance of al-dhikr, and a deep reflection on one's actions. The purpose of this stage is to strengthen the conscience, to cultivate a state of spiritual vigilance, and to prepare the heart for the next level of the journey. An-nafs al-mutma'inna, the tranquil self. This is the highest and most profound level of the self, the spiritual destination of the Sufi path. It is the self that has been purified of its base desires and has found its peace and contentment in Allah. It is the state of spiritual perfection, state where the human being's will has become completely aligned with the divine will. Shaykh Qadri describes it as a state of profound intimacy with Allah, a state of spiritual serenity and unshakable certainty. He teaches that this state is the result of a rigorous spiritual journey, a journey that involves a continuous practice of remembrance, contemplation, and devotion. The heart Qalb, for Shaykh Qadri, is the spiritual center of the human being, the seat of divine knowledge and the battleground for the spiritual war between the ego and the soul. The ultimate goal of Tasawwuf is the purification of the heart, Tazkiya, a process that involves cleansing it of all spiritual diseases, such as pride, envy, and greed, so that it can become a pure mirror that reflects the divine light. This is the very core of his teachings, a spiritual science that provides a systematic and practical methodology for the purification of the heart and the attainment of inner peace. Part 3. The inseparability of Shari'ah and Tariqah. One of the most crucial and powerful aspects of Shaykh Tahir-ul-Qadri's teachings on Tasawwuf is his vehement and scholarly defense of the inseparability of Shari'ah and Tariqah. Argues that a Sufism that is detached from the divine law is a false Sufism, a form of spiritual anarchy that leads to error and deviance. For him, the Shari'ah, the divine law, and the Tariqah, the spiritual path, are not in conflict. They are 2 sides of the same coin, 2 dimensions of a single reality. He uses the beautiful and powerful analogy of the body and the Ruh, soul, to explain this relationship. The Shari'ah is the body of Islam, the outer form, the set of rules and regulations that govern our lives. The Tariqah is the Ruh, the inner essence, the spiritual reality that animates the outer form. A body without a Ruh is a lifeless corpse, and a Ruh without a body cannot function in this world. He argues that a person who claims to be a Sufi but neglects their prayers, their fasts, or their other religious obligations is a person who is seeking a Ruh without a body, a form of spiritual fantasy that is detached from the realities of the divine law. Conversely, A legalism that neglects the Tariqah is a dry and lifeless form of religion. It is a body without a ruh, a religion of ritual without an animating spiritual fire. Shaykh Qadri argues that the ultimate purpose of the Shari'ah is not just to regulate our lives, but to lead us to a profound and intimate relationship with Allah. The Tariqah is the means to achieve that intimacy. It is the spiritual methodology that animates the outward acts of worship with sincerity, love, and a profound sense of divine presence. The prayer is not just a set of physical movements. It is a conversation with Allah. The fast is not just an abstention from food and drink. It is a means of purifying the soul. The charity is not just a transfer of wealth. It is an act of love and compassion. Shaykh Qadri's teachings on this matter are a powerful refutation of both the anti-Sharia, Sufis, and the anti-Sufism, legalists. He presents a holistic and integrated vision of Islam where the outer law and the inner path are in perfect harmony. He argues that the journey of the soul is a continuous effort to perfect the observance of the Sharia with the spirit of the Tariqah. The ultimate reality, Hakika of Islam, is achieved when the outer form and the inner essence are in perfect alignment. He presents a vision of Islam where the rule of law and the rule of the heart are one and the same. Part 4. The role of the spiritual guide and the spiritual orders. In Shaykh Tahir-ul-Qadri's teachings on Tasawwuf, the role of the spiritual master, or the Shaykh, is of paramount importance. He argues that the spiritual journey is not a path that can be traversed alone. It is a treacherous path, fraught with pitfalls and the deceptions of the ego. Without the guidance of a master who has already traversed the path, a seeker is likely to get lost or led astray. The Shaykh is not a person who claims to be a divine being or a mediator between the seeker and Allah. He is a guide, a spiritual physician who has been granted a divine trust to guide others. He is a person who has perfected his own spiritual journey and can, with divine permission, guide others on the same path. He is the living embodiment of the prophetic tradition, a person who, through his example, his teachings, and his presence, inspires and guides the seeker to a state of profound intimacy with Allah. The relationship between the seeker Murad and the guide is one of love, trust, and absolute surrender. The seeker surrenders their ego, not their intellect, to the guide, trusting that the guide's wisdom and experience will lead them to the destination. The Shaykh provides the seeker with the spiritual methodology and the specific practices that are necessary for their own spiritual state. The guide is not a rigid dictator, but a loving and compassionate mentor, a spiritual father who guides the seeker with wisdom and gentleness. The Sufi orders, or Turaq in this context, are not sects or cults. They are spiritual schools, institutions of spiritual training that have been established for centuries to facilitate the journey of the soul. Each order has its own methodology, its own set of spiritual practices, and its own chain of transmission that links it directly to the Prophet Muhammad. Shaykh Qadri's own order is a part of this rich tradition. The purpose of these orders is to provide the seeker with a structured and systematic methodology for inner purification and spiritual advancement. The spiritual training in these orders involves a number of key practices. Dhikr, remembrance of Allah. This is the spiritual engine of the journey. The seeker is taught to engage in a continuous, rhythmic remembrance of Allah, a practice that purifies the heart and fills it with divine light. The dhikr is not just a verbal repetition. It is a practice that aims to establish a continuous state of divine awareness. Muraqabah, contemplation. This is the practice of contemplative meditation, where the seeker sits in silence and contemplates the divine presence. It is a practice that is aimed at silencing the mind, calming the heart, and opening the soul to divine inspiration. Muhasabah, self-reckoning. This is the practice of continuous self-examination, where the seeker reflects on their actions, thoughts, and intentions, and holds themselves accountable for their mistakes. It is a practice that is aimed at strengthening the conscience and cultivating a state of spiritual vigilance. Suhbah, spiritual companionship. Shaykh Qadri places immense importance on the role of good company in the spiritual journey. He argues that the company of the righteous, the company of those who are on the same path, is a source of spiritual strength, protection against the deceptions of the ego, and a continuous source of inspiration for Shaykh Qadri. The Sufi orders are a crucial institution for the preservation and transmission of the inner reality of Islam. They are the guardians of the spiritual heritage of the Prophet, the schools that train the spiritual soldiers of Allah, the masters who guide the seekers to a state of profound intimacy with the divine. Conclusion: a legacy of inner transformation and truth. In conclusion, Shaykh Muhammad Tahir-ul-Qadri's teachings on Tasawwuf are a profound and comprehensive contribution to contemporary Islamic thought. He has meticulously re-articulated the truth and the advent of Tasawwuf, demonstrating with scholarly precision that it is not a foreign innovation, but an integral and indispensable part of Islam, rooted directly in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. He has shown that Tasawwuf is the spiritual discipline of Islam, the path to Ihsan, and the methodology for the purification of the heart. His main contribution lies in his ability to present Tasawwuf as a dynamic, relevant, and necessary spiritual path for the modern world. He has a powerful voice that defends Tasawwuf against its critics, arguing that it is the very heart of the faith. He has presented a holistic vision of Islam, where the outer law Shari'ah and the inner path Tariqah are in perfect harmony. Two sides of the same coin that lead the seeker to the ultimate reality, Haqiqah. Has re-established the vital role of the spiritual guide and the Sufi orders as essential institutions for the spiritual training of the believers. In a world that is often torn between a rigid, externalist legalism and a spiritual confusion, Tahir-ul-Qadri's teachings offer a path of balance and moderation. They are a powerful reminder that the true essence of Islam lies not just in a set of rules, but in a profound and intimate relationship with Allah. It is a legacy that continues to inspire millions of people to seek a holistic and compassionate vision of Islam, one where the pursuit of law and the pursuit of spirituality are one and the same. His work on Tasawwuf is a testament to the fact that the spiritual heritage of the Prophet is a living reality, a vibrant force that continues to guide the human heart to a state of profound peace and tranquility. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual and spiritual journey. Please subscribe to our channel to continue our exploration of the rich and profound essence of Sufism.